Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. I'm so pleased to see such a wonderful representation of our global community here on this webinar today. Thank you for taking the time to join us. If you're just now jumping in, we are part of the Suddenly Distributed web series. We're going to be talking today about tools for effective Agile teams. My name is Isaac Garcia. I'm a co-founder and host of a virtual Agile community, Coaching Agile Journeys, and it's absolutely my pleasure and honor to be your moderator today for this webinar. So first of all, I want to say I'm so grateful to Retrium and their co-presenter, the Agile Alliance, for kicking off such a timely and helpful webinar series and gathering such a great group of panelists, which I'll allow to introduce themselves in a second, here today for this session. So I want to thank all of you who submitted questions for our panel discussion. The panelists and I have gone through those, and we've tried to distill them down to the most impactful and requested questions, which we'll try to answer in our session today. Our hope is that you will learn at least one new thing that you can apply to your situation and one tool that you can consider for use in your teams. I want to highly recommend you have a notepad or pen and paper of some sort to take notes, as we're going to be discussing a lot as we cover this ground of tools that our remote teams can use. So a few housekeeping items before we jump in. During the panel discussion, you may have questions that come up, and I want to encourage you to submit these questions through the Zoom Q&A interface. So just hover your mouse over your Zoom window, and you'll see a little button that says Q&A. Click on that, put your questions in there. Now, it's possible that we're not going to have time to answer Q&A at the end, but the panelists have very generously offered to answer some of those questions in a blog post afterwards. So keep your eyes open for that. Also, in case you're wondering, we are recording this session, and so we're going to make that available to you on the Retreum blog, or you can follow them on Twitter at RetriumHQ and see once that's posted and go over and watch it. So you will have the opportunity to revisit this in the future. Now, there's a lot of talent represented on this panel today, and we could be discussing tools and practices for hours. But what we decided to do is we're going to follow this format. We're going to introduce 3 top questions, and then we're going to go to the panelists and have them break it down. But we want to look at it from 2 different angles. The first angle is we want to see the behaviors and the practices and maybe how we can help coach and work with our people to help them understand what they're feeling and what they're going through. The second is, of course, what tools we can use effectively. But I want to point out to you, there was a great question that we were asked previously that said, can you help us understand the mindset and the skills that are necessary to develop to make tools enable effective remote work? That's really what we want to discuss today. So we're going to be addressing both the behavioral and the tools as we go through this webinar. All right, so at this point, I want to pause and allow each of the panelists to introduce themselves briefly. We're going to start with Hailey. Hailey, could you introduce yourself to the group, please?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Isaac. Hi, everyone. My name is Hailey Temple. I'm calling in from sunny, well, not so sunny right now, Orange County, California, and I work for MURAL as a collaboration and facilitation coach. So I've been doing online work and collaboration for a couple of years now, before it was the thing of the moment, but happy to be here and part of an awesome global community.
Awesome. Thank you, Hailey. And then David, would you go next to introduce yourself, please?
Thanks, Isaac. I'm David, CEO and co-founder at Retrium. We are a platform for effective distributed Agile retrospectives. We've been doing this now for many, many years, and given everything that's going on in the world right now, hopeful that we can help in some way to make your retrospectives more effective.
Awesome. Thank you, David. And then lastly, but not least at all, Nick from Range. Can you introduce yourself to us, please?
Thanks, Isaac. Hi, everyone. I'm Nick. I'm currently in San Francisco. I'm the CMO of Range. Range is a team success platform. So we work with Agile teams to help support them remotely so they can stay in sync, focus on what matters, and really build and foster their culture. I've worked in 7 different countries and have felt everyone's pain about trying to engage with teams when they're in multiple time zones. And I'm very excited to be here. Thanks again for inviting me, Retreom.
Awesome. So glad you could be here. And I thank you everyone for joining us. Our hope again is that you get some great value from this wonderful panel that's been assembled here. All right, so before we jump into the first question, I do want to set a little bit of context. We all recognize that our world is dramatically different today than it was a few months ago. Our teams have shifted to working remotely, some teams, all of them working remotely or working from home. And what we saw is a breakdown in communication. So we've seen that. There's been a breakdown in a lot of organizations in their communication, but that's followed by a feeling of being disconnected or being disoriented from your culture. So in person, you know, when we're in the office, we have a lot of opportunities to renew our belonging cues. You're walking past someone in the hallways or you stop at a desk just to say good morning. Remotely, we need to be intentional about crafting these interactions that encourage vulnerability, right? So asking, how are you doing? How was your weekend? We have to work at that a little bit more than just when we're in the office and in person. So this leads to trust and turn into belonging, which is what we're feeling might be lost now. So a lot of what everyone's feeling as they sense the breakdown in process is possibly why they feel like they need a new tool set, right? So people see a process breakdown and say, if I only had better tools, then it would be solved. But recognize that there's really a breakdown in two things, and then there's more, but at least your communication and culture are being challenged through this changing situation. So the first big step is for everyone to recognize how the remote workplace really is going to impact our work processes. If you're a manager, the world's going to be a new world for you, and how you manage people without having them sit in your office, what that looks like. If you're a scrum master, maybe your ceremonies are challenged. If you're a coach or someone else, a type of a leader, you've got to adapt your practices to the new world. So we're going to look at some of these tools and again, the behaviors behind them, and we're going to get into the questions right now. What's great is the first question is really about what we're all feeling. So people and teams are feeling disconnected. This leads to a breakdown in trust, a lack of psychological safety, and vulnerability. So how can we improve this sense of being disconnected? David, we're going to start with you. Could you give us your thoughts on that, please?
Yeah, so we're all struggling in this together right now. And I firmly believe that psychological safety in an organization starts at the top of the company and works its way down. Culture starts at the top. And in the last webinar we did in this series, the Suddenly Distributed series, I have to give a shout out to Esther Derby, who said something that really resonated with me, which is no surprise for anyone who knows her. And she said that, psychological safety is not that you feel comfortable all the time. Psychological safety is that you feel comfortable sharing what you're uncomfortable about. So the question is, how do you encourage people to feel safe sharing what they are uncomfortable about right now? Because we all have some manifestation of discomfort as a result of the crisis that's going on globally. So one way that we can do this is to get over the sense of watermelon status that some of you might have heard, where the watermelon status is everything's great on the outside, it's green, but red on the inside, just like a watermelon. And you're not comfortable sharing the red part of the watermelon, it just looks green. So how can you do that? One tangible, practical way of doing that is to create what I call an oops wall. So an oops wall is a place that people go to share the mistakes that they made at work publicly and transparently and intentionally. And then people on a regular basis can celebrate those mistakes. And I use that word carefully, celebrate, because if we are to get over the sense of hiding our mistakes and feel comfortable sharing them transparently, then we should be celebrating that mistakes are being made. That is a necessary precondition for innovation in my mind. So how do we tie back an oops wall to tools? Because if you're in person, of course, you could just use a whiteboard. But now that we're not, what can you use? So one way to have an oops wall is to use Slack, or whatever your company collaboration product is. MS Teams works fine too. Just have a channel that's called oops wall. And anytime anyone makes a mistake, just share it and have a celebration around that mistake to make people know this is okay and actually encouraged at our company. Another tool that you could use if you wanted more of an archived look at this is an online whiteboard like MURAL, to just have a place that people can go to share their mistakes on an oops wall. But I've found these oops walls being really helpful in encouraging people to be vulnerable and share the mistakes that they're feeling.
Awesome, thanks, David. So next, Nick, why don't you share with us your thoughts on how you would handle this sense of disconnect or tools that you might recommend?
Yeah, I think it's hard to underscore enough how strange all this is. This is really actually not remote work, right? We're all working from home with kids and with a lot of different things in the background that's not normal. So as much as there are great remote work practices, getting up to speed on remote work, if you're new to it anyway, is challenging. Getting up to speed to working from home with children in the background and new schedules is extremely challenging. So the amount of kind of background dissonance that's occurring right now is a lot to deal with. So as a team, it's very natural to say, all right, how can I really focus on those belonging cues when I actually can't say, how are you in the morning? That's just the most normal thing that we all have. So you have to be extremely intentional, both as a manager and as a teammate, to build those into your day. And as David underscored, vulnerability is a key to that, and belonging cues are a way for us to renew that sense of trust and vulnerability. And we do that every week, multiple times. If you can't do that multiple times, you really start to feel that breakdown. So being very intentional, for example, just at the beginning of a meeting, of saying, we're going to take a moment here to do a round robin of just how everybody's doing, as opposed to just saying, hi. We're really saying, okay, how are you feeling today? What's your mood? Because it may be that all of a sudden, you didn't get the greatest night's sleep because your kid woke you up, and that's going to impact actually how you conduct yourself. And you might not know that if you just dive into the meeting. So if you can be very intentional about doing a check-in and making sure everybody's involved, it also helps with the meeting, because actually it's been proven that if you engage with the meeting in the beginning, you're much more likely to participate in throughout the meeting. So it's a great practice to have regardless. And then doing checkouts at the end of the meeting. Those are two very simple things that you can do right away. Icebreaker questions are actually hugely useful. So at Range, we actually have a product where we have icebreakers built in. We have 300, and we've worked with different behavioral psychologists to help us develop those. And those can be as simple as, how was your weekend, to how do you like to receive feedback? And over time, you start to build this great lexicon of understanding across the team with these questions, because it displays things like everything from themes around cooking to themes around what you like to do in your work habits. And so you really get to know everybody, and it showcases people in a different range. You can actually bring in icebreakers into Slack. There's Icebreaker Slack bot. You can go look up. There's a bunch of those as well. We actually have a free tool at icebreaker.range.co where you can just use the questions and just try asking those. They could be during your stand-ups. They could be at team meetings, and integrate those. And then just also at the end, really taking quiet moments to, it's kind of go, go, go. Oftentimes in meetings, you want to get through all the agenda, but you don't leave enough time at the end to really check in with the team and just see collectively getting feedback about how everyone is doing. So making time for that is really, really useful.
Wow, there is so much in what you just said there, Nick. That was a great, thank you for that. Just checking in and checking out. What's great is you can do that where you are in your meetings today, right? You're having some kind of meetings, whether they're in phone or video, taking that pause and really seeing the human side. That fantastic answer. So, hey, let's go over to you. What are your thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I think to build on what's been said, for sure, it's important to have both, we were talking about synchronous, so when you're in meetings live, and then asynchronous moments for connectivity. And I think it's important to recognize those as being intentional and document them and make them a part of your team, almost a new team charter in a way for given this situation, and with your family, because we said, Nick, I love you said this is remote work, but not really. So you have to establish what those are and keep reminding and reinforcing people. So for example, when you establish those rules of engagement for people in a meeting or between meetings, you can document them in, like we use MURAL, of course, for example, to make that visible documentation clear of a team charter where we say, these are the norms of our team. We've established these are the rules of engagement, and that's how we're going to go forward. And then using, as you mentioned, different extensions and tools to reinforce that behavior and that habit. Some examples of ones I wanted to toss in there too in terms of tools and best practices are, I love Elmo, which is enough, let's move on, is a great one. So if you're feeling as though people are talking for too long, you can go forward and say, let's continue the conversation. And I've done that by literally in MURAL dragging in a picture of the Sesame Street character to be polite about it. But there are also some great cards as well that David, I think you showed me that you can just kind of raise if you have your video camera on. And then even with your family too, I think the people not in that meeting who aren't aware of it, making it clear, hey, family and friends, when I have my headphones on, that means I'm in a meeting and this is what I need from you. And maybe your young child isn't going to understand that, but at least giving some sort of way to let them know that you're in the zone and have that as a really clear definition and have that documented for people is essential.
That's so fantastic. And oh, go ahead, Dave. Yeah.
Yeah, just to jump in there, I shared a link to the cards that Hailey just mentioned. Lisette Sutherland has these collaboration super cards, which enable you to share things like, hey, you're frozen. It's a little card. I wish I had them with me right now. Or Elmo, enough, let's move on. They're fantastic. I know a lot of people who use them really effectively. So I shared that link in the chat.
I just love, again, what's great already, we're only a few minutes into talking about answering this, but I think even all of your answers really show an intentionality, right? I'm going to be intentional about setting up the conditions for people to connect, people to have a positive discussion, people to interrupt appropriately. And Hailey, I love that you said that, because I have this on my monitor over there, and I just sometimes use Elmo right there just to help move a conversation on. But this is intentionality. It's us specifically looking, how do we help people not feel disconnected or even isolated? So what else, you guys, panelists, before we move on, what other topics or tips this is, I think, the number one thing. How do we keep people from feeling disconnected? This is what people want to know. What other tips or tricks would you guys have for tools or ways that we can help people feel connected again?
Well, I can jump in there.
Oh, go ahead, David.
Oh, sure. And then you can go next, Nick. So putting aside tools just for a moment, the difficulty in my experience of connecting with others when you're distributed is that it's not as easy to create unintentional conversation. So it's very easy to say, we're having a meeting at this time, but if you don't bump into people randomly in the hallway or at the coffee table, right? So you have to create those opportunities. So the question is then, well, how do you create those opportunities? And the best way that we've discovered at Retrium is to create opportunities through opt-in meetings that are standing. So for example, and they're fun meetings, right? So for example, for a while we were doing these opt-in 10-minute sessions where people would do planks together. Okay, so if you don't know what a plank is, as exercise, it's really hard. You get down on the ground and you get your hands down and you get flat on the ground and you're trying to just hold your plank for a while. And some people could do it for 15 seconds, some people not even that, some people for minutes if they're very in shape. I wish I could get that far. And it's completely voluntary, but it's funny. It enables people to connect. And it's something that you think you could only do if you're in person, but actually the lesson that I've learned is that much of what you can do in person, you can actually do online. You just have to be a bit more creative about it. One other way I can give a concrete example there of creating opportunities for connection, again, in an opt-in voluntary way that's more organic, is to do open lunches. So if I'm going to go make a sandwich and eat lunch, my natural inclination, because I'm working from home, is to just go to my kitchen, make the lunch, eat by myself, and come back to the office and then keep working. But there's really no reason why you can't do lunch with somebody else or do coffee with somebody else, even though you're a distributed team. So I might say, hey, I'm going to go make my sandwich right now. Who wants to join me for lunch? Fire up a Zoom, and it's opt-in. If people choose to come and have lunch with me, that's great. And if not, that's fine too. Which leads me to my last point there, which has to do with the law of 2 feet. So those of you who are familiar with open space technology will have heard of the law of 2 feet already, but I like to apply it to really any meeting that we're in. So the law of 2 feet says that if you are not currently adding value to the conversation and or you are not getting value from the conversation, you are free to leave. And establishing that as a working agreement for the meetings that you are in every day for distributed teams is really important, because Zoom meetings or any virtual meetings back to back to back to back, it's really tiring, it's draining. So you want to intentionally walk away from the meetings that you are not getting value from or adding value from to re-energize. That will enable you to have more constructive water cooler conversations with people. You'll be in a better headspace.
That just sounds so fun. Not the plank part, but actually engaging with people in an opt-in way and just saying, hey, why don't you come join me? So I love that. So fun. By the way, speaking of fun, someone put in the comments, and I just had to share this, someone had a virtual talent show. So they opened up a virtual meeting and did a talent show. What a great idea. Again, opt-in, not everybody has to participate, but it's fun. You can bring something fun to share with the group. I love that. So Hailey or Nick, anything else, other ideas on this topic? Either one of you? Well, I guess Nick, you unmuted first.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, that is a great example of people a lot of trial and error is happening right now. And what I would encourage everybody is their team says, well, saying we're just going to try a couple things to see what the cadence works for the week. Maybe we'll do some morning informal drop-in sessions for coffee. We'll do lunches. We actually do a happy hour at the end of the week where we do these MTV Cribs tours of our abodes, which are just kind of fun to try out. So trying different things. We actually have a shared cookbook that we're doing where everybody just throws in different recipes that we're building out. We have tried meditation sessions. We're doing yoga for lunch. If you have a talent, just kind of share it. And it's surprising how many people are like, yeah, I'll try that out. And I think if you really want to get more formal, check out Donut, which is an app that really schedules times for people to be together, or something called Hallway Chat. That's hallway.chat. So it really is designed to actually engineer those kind of hallway conversations that you might have. And don't underestimate the power of games. So actually turns out we have a lot of gamers on our team, and they're getting back into their kind of sessions, both personally, but also you can do rock, paper, scissors. You can do lots of things on Zoom. There's actually Jackbox games. So there's something called Drawful. And also if you go to horsepace.com, you can do code names on Zoom, which is really fun. So just trying a bunch of those things, it really helps again to bring out that sense of vulnerability and have everybody participate.
Do you have links to those, Nick? I would love to see what those are. I'm sure the attendees would like to see lists too.
Yeah, I'll put them in right now.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick.
My only thing to add is I love everything coming in from the chat. I think we have a wonderful community here of people who are trying things, which is fantastic. Keep sharing your advice. And I think a lot of just what I'm hearing is permission, is creating a sense of safety and permission for people to try things and to experiment and mess things up, which is so necessary right now. So thank you for that, everyone.
Wow, that's such a great segue for us to move on. But what a way to sum that up there, Hailey. Permission. And that's really what it is. It's giving people permission to be people, really, even in a virtual space. So wonderful. Okay, let's move forward. Oh, one last thought I wanted to throw in there, something I've started doing, and maybe you don't have the opportunity to do some of these, or perhaps you're not in a leadership place where you can call meetings for people. If you have an IM or a Slack program, I've been doing virtual water coolers. When I normally walk in the office, when I was in the office, I would stop and say hi to people. Start your day by opening a few windows and shooting, hey, how are you doing? Not asking for anything for business, but just pinging people and saying, how are you today? Just spreading that brightness and that happiness. So great topic there. We're gonna move on to problem number 2, which is a lack of engagement. Now we can see this both from our team members while we're remote, and we can also see it from participants in a meeting. You know it as the dreaded multiple screen syndrome, or if someone accidentally lets their phone slip into the frame, right, because they were holding it underneath the camera. But we see a lack of engagement. So our team members are beginning to disengage, and maybe even our participants in meetings are disengaging. What are some ways and some tools that we can work to try to keep them engaged? Nick, why don't we start with you on this one?
Sure. And engagement definitely stems from that same issues that we're all facing about disconnection. And in order to be able to really focus on your work and feel like you're connected, there's a bunch of different things you can try. One is to be very mindful that, again, this is not business as usual in any way, shape, or form. So you really have to over communicate. Even when you probably think you're over communicating, you probably aren't, because so many people are processing things. Being very intentional about engagement in every step. So if you're going to shift over to say, how can we be engaged, break it down between thinking about how can I engage people asynchronously versus how can I engage people synchronously. So synchronously, for those who aren't as familiar with the term, is what we're doing right now, right? A video meeting is very synchronous. An asynchronous meeting is when you're able to work on your own and coordinate things. So for example, we do actually asynchronous stand-ups with Range because we can do check-ins there in 5 minutes in the morning. We can say what we did, what we're doing, and then we actually answer those questions, and we can also share our mood. So all of a sudden being able to say, how could I, where I would normally engineer engagement, what are other ways in which I can do that? And asynchronous engagement and tools to do that are very, very critical, because over time, as David just said, it's really exhausting to be in meetings nonstop on, and there's actually just a study released at Stanford about how, being able to focus like we are now, where we're these, kind of floating apparitions, and being able to just engage by looking each other in the eye is exhausting. It really takes a lot more energy than we think it does. Again, I mentioned the icebreaker team questions, but also think about different team updates. Do you actually, there are ways in which you can bring thanks and call outs and kudos, which are really important to helping to renew those connections and giving people the recognition of their work into different ways. So we do that in Range, but you can also use Kudos bot in Slack, for example, or just say at the end of even through email at the end of the week, saying, here's some top 5 things that I think were highlights of the week that we should all really recognize.
I've actually been doing some of that and had it done. It's started, someone sent me an email and copied my manager and just said, hey, I really appreciate what you did the other day. And I just thought that's really great, that outpouring of encouragement, positivity. We need that right now. We need to know people see us and appreciate our work that we're doing. So wonderful topics. Thank you. David, what about you?
So I see engagement from 2 different lenses, right? There's your own knowledge of your personal engagement in the team. And then there's your sense of how engaged your team is with the work that you're doing. And they're two different sides of a coin, but they're actually a little bit different in terms of how I'd handle them. So if it's your own personal engagement, you can run a personal retrospective just to ask yourself, why do I not feel engaged? Keep asking why until you get to the root cause of whatever the issue is, and see if you can personally take some incremental step to boost your engagement back into the workplace. And sometimes for you personally, it might be something out of your control. I mean, we're all going through difficult times right now, and there are just no solutions to some of these issues. And accepting that is a way of getting your engagement back up, because you start being less condescending towards yourself and more accepting of the reality that you're in. The other lens, though, and perhaps the more interesting one from a tooling perspective, is also how engaged is my team right now? So that's a complicated question, because everyone has their own manifestation of the issues that they're experiencing right now. So one great way to figure out why is the team not engaged at the moment is to run an activity called Team Radar. And a Team Radar is just a spider diagram. Actually, I have a screenshot of one. I can share my screen. I think I'm allowed to do that, right? So let me share my screen here. And here we go. So it looks something like this, where you have, how happy are you at work in this particular case? And there's different spokes. So clarity, autonomy, mastery, meaning, impact, and engagement are all aspects of work happiness. And you'd ask the team to rate themselves from 1 to 5 to get a sense of how they're feeling on each of those aspects of work happiness. And you can very easily get a sense that in this contrived example, engagement is low and clarity is high. And so you could dig in more with the team based on that information. You can also run this type of activity on the work from home scenario that we're all in. So things like ability to focus, or interruptions from kids, spouses, and dogs, tooling support. You can make your own spokes and get a sense of where is the team collectively suffering right now, so that again you can try to figure out a way to remove that problem. This is available in Retrium if that's of interest to you. You can also just ask people to submit their ratings and analyze it that way. So I'd really recommend kind of digging in to figure out why, because lack of engagement is the result of a symptom that you need to diagnose.
Yeah, that's true. Hailey, any thoughts on engagement?
Yeah, I'm furiously nodding my head over here because I 100% agree with that sentiment of you're tapping into someone's afraid or worried about something else. Like they're worried about missing other things. They're worried about their loved ones at this point. So it's as a person and as a manager and as a Scrum Master tapping into that and addressing that challenge. I think this strange time in our lives is also really wonderful to assess how your team operates in terms of meeting and not meeting. And I always love when people joke, oh, that could have been an email or something like that. Meeting could have been an email. Okay, well, this is your chance to pressure test what interactions in your team truly can be emails, can be meetings, can be Slack messages, can be an emoji or a hand raise, whatever your team wants to use. And we did that at MURAL, kind of did a little like audit, if you will, of what our meetings were. And so we actually have this better meeting builder template, and it's more of the larger culture. What do we currently have on our radar when we are working in person? And now what did we want to shift? How does that transfer over to online and remote work? And then thinking about, given the things that still need to be meetings, how do we define what needs to be a meeting? And how do we build meetings that drive engagement and are more purposeful when we get together? So I think that's how I would think about it at a larger cultural, team structured setting. And then maybe some tips for in-person when you're face-to-face on camera would be to, I think doing some, you mentioned like check-ins and check-outs are really great. I've done a lot of realizing people are very stressed, taking a moment to do meditation with people and just saying, take a deep breath, like let's close our eyes. It feels a little bit the woo, like wooey, as a lot of facilitators say, but it's a really great moment to focus people and tap into what they're going through right now. And also recognizing that distraction happens. So one that we've adopted at MURAL in our meetings is Okay, well, to start the meeting, let's pick an exotic place where someone went on vacation recently. Bali? Okay, that's Bali. Okay, so now anytime somebody's distracted, I haven't been to Bali, by the way. Anytime anyone has been distracted in the meeting, and they come back, you say, I'm sorry, I was in Bali. So it's a way to recognize that distraction happens, and not to say that it's okay, but to say, we're all human. Now I'm back and I'm focused, and let's keep going. So building some of that into your meetings is really great.
That's awesome.
I'd even add, Hailey, that it actually, in my mind, is okay to be distracted right now. I mean, we're all distracted by a lot of things. And so I have 4 kids, and I would just love it if one of them would run in right now screaming, because it's okay that we're all going through the same thing, and being okay with that and demonstrating that to people will create a culture of acceptance and empathy that's just lacking in too many places. So it's okay to be in Bali. We all want to be in Bali sometimes, actually. And it's okay to be there, especially right now. And then one other thing that just occurred to me as you all were talking is that, different people get engaged in meetings in different ways. So for example, some people are very comfortable speaking in front of the entire team or the entire group that's in the meeting, and that's their preferred mode of communication. Other people don't feel comfortable speaking in front of a larger group, but rather feel much more comfortable in a one-on-one setting, maybe just me and Isaac, for example, or me and Nick, for example, or me and Hailey. Alternating the mode of communication to enable people to communicate in the way they feel most comfortable will also boost engagement. You can, in fact, have a meeting that is for the team, maybe it's 10, 15 people, however many, but then if you're on Zoom, at least use their breakout room functionality to create the one-on-one environment for people, so that those who feel more comfortable in a one-on-one are able to engage in a different way, and then bring the findings back to the larger group. That's a really powerful way of increasing engagement. And similarly, async communication. Some people just will not really participate in a verbal way on these calls, and accepting where people are instead of trying to force change, and then enabling people based on where they are to participate is really helpful. So virtual sticky notes, brainstorming before the meeting starts in an async way can help draw out the ideas and engage people who just don't feel comfortable in the synchronous type meeting.
Awesome. And David, I want to put an exclamation point. You actually said exactly what I was going to say too. We need to recognize everyone. I saw a comment in the comments window a second ago that said, have you noticed a decrease in velocity? Right. And I think there's a lot of people out there saying, well, why aren't we getting the same production we had in the office? What's happening? And I think something to realize is this is not just a remote work experiment, right, happening in a vacuum or in a lab somewhere. What we're all experiencing is a global impacting phenomenon, and realizing that people need understanding and empathy, just what David said, and taking the time to be okay with real life happening. Yes, we all work and we want to be productive and want to get work done, but real life is happening around us. And so rather than saying remote work just doesn't work or everyone's so distracted, recognize that everyone's thinking about different things right now, our global challenges that we're facing. That's pretty large. Nick, before we go to the next question, I wanted to see if you had anything else to add into this discussion before we maybe move to the next question.
Yeah, I think it really struck me, David's point about doing your own personal retrospective. I think being able to take that moment to really check in with yourself. And we have emojis that are built in, and we do, as I mentioned, part of our check-ins. And that actually is not just about sharing the emoji and figuring out what's the coolest emoji I can share today, but really actually asking yourself, how am I doing today? And getting that practice down. And then we actually chart the emojis over time, so you can see how your mood was doing, so you can look back. And that's really useful to do for a week, because you might be like, God, actually, I just look at my emojis and I was really sleepy all week. And that might be very apparent, or it might not, but it gives you a moment to really actually understand yourself and how you're showing up. I think this is also a great time for everybody to really rethink their work week. We all have great agile practices that we put in place, but the work week is a pretty archaic thing. And then the fact that we're split over multiple time zones, it kind of breaks down automatically anyway. So what we've actually done at Range is and I can put this template in, we have personal playbooks. So we've helped people understand what our home work experience is like now. As in, I have 3 kids and I'm going to be, and then we actually code that into our calendar. So we have a green, yellow, and red code system. So green is when it's family time. Yellow is when I'm available, but my kid might interrupt me because they need some support. And red is when I'm focused collaboration time. And I think collaboration time, there's also ways you can really engineer that. So Collaboration is when oftentimes a lot of people feel, the fun happens. So figuring out ways in which you can do that actually asynchronously as well. So MURAL is great for that, for thinking about doing brainstorming, as well as on your own. You can actually do things like crazy eights, give yourself 8 minutes to do 8 ideas with Post-it notes just in your room. And that can kind of get you unstuck and free you up and do your own collaboration. And then you can also, of course, book time to do collaboration where you're just meeting together and collaborating. But those are all tips that we found are really useful.
Wow.
I love the green, yellow, red thing for based on kids, because this resonates with me perfectly. But for me, I think it would be every 5 seconds I'd have to change the status, because so many of them run in and out all the time. So it's blinking back.
We actually we update it every week because everything's adjusting, right? School and stuff. So.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. So we're going to follow this idea of meetings, right? And how sometimes people feel disconnected and not engaged in meetings. We're going to move into our third question, which is about general meeting facilitation. And so we're having a challenge now. We're remote. And for some reason, all these Zoom meetings we're in don't feel very organized. Boy, in the office, we'd get in there and we'd just make it happen. But now, are our meetings efficient? Are they relevant? We feel like we're just floating through time on the never-ending Zoom meeting. Hailey, why don't we start out with you on this? What would you suggest for trying to solve this problem?
I definitely feel this pain. You feel as if you've been on meetings for 4 hours straight, and then you come out of it and you're just like no sense of place anymore. So I think first of all, it's important I love that idea, Nick, from Range, recognizing when you're in that zone and you're feeling a little bit out of place, and protecting your time between meetings as well. And making that a time for you to rest, to change gears, and to go use the restroom or get coffee or a drink whenever you need it. Like, you're a human being. I know, crazy, right? But you definitely need that time, and give yourself that time, because you're a person, and people want to work with a human being, not a robot. Okay, remember that. Now, I also think that it's important, going back to kind of rituals and team culture, is to establish that there has to be a purpose for every meeting, and making that communicated really clearly. So if you don't have a purpose, if there's no sense of what's the outcome we're going for, then there's no meeting. And that's much harder to do than it's easy to say. But making sure, if someone just puts a meeting on your calendar, ping them on Slack or whatever you're using and say, hey, Isaac, I see you put a meeting on our calendar. Can you tell me a little bit more about what do you need from me today? What's my purpose or expectation for this meeting? And people will start getting in the habit of knowing that, yeah, if I want to book a meeting with Isaac, I need to let him know why he's there. And that kind of triggers people, because we get in this habit of just putting meetings on people's calendars, but not knowing why and what the outcome is. And that's how you're going to get drained. So protect your time, protect your teammates' time, and it'll make things more purposeful as well. And I also think, I love this question that came into, I wanted to highlight it, was what if you're doing that with people from 6 different time zones? Somebody here is working with someone from 6 different time zones, which is incredible. You probably have an incredibly diverse team with lots of different perspectives, and that's wonderful. So that's when you have to make sure that, as Nick was saying, you are taking opportunities to connect and follow up and create structure and make a thread throughout your work and your conversations. So I think that Range is a great way to do that. Slack, of course, a great way to keep things connected, and they work well together. But making sure that you have those connected threads throughout conversations. And when you do need to meet in person or on camera, in this case, you're sharing the burden of somebody joining at late time for them, someone joining really early, and shifting that. So your stand-up becomes a kind of a moving stand-up in a way. But it's a great way to also take a moment and recognize, wow, our team is diverse, that's great. Sometimes, Isaac, you have to join late, and Nick, you have to join early. Now we're gonna change. How does that feel? So it builds empathy for a global team.
I think your suggestion is spot on, and I recommend that to people all the time, shifting the time of when you run these meetings so that you build empathy. There's another approach that I've heard that I think is also worth sharing, which is to, if you have a rotating time, you are always going to be someone on the team will be in pain because of that at all times. And probably a large percentage of the people on the team will always have pain. So an alternative approach to reduce that level of pain is to actually split the meeting into 2, maybe 3, depending on how many time zones you're on, and have one person who's an ambassador on the team who will go to each of those meetings to represent the team in those sub-meetings, and have that ambassador rotate. So it's only one person who has pain at any point in time, and everyone is going to have that experience. But once it's been your week and you're done, or your day and you're done, it'll be some time before it's your turn to have that pain again. But the role of that ambassador is to share the other meetings, the knowledge that came from the other meetings with the rest of the team. And that's another approach that I think can be very helpful, or at least worth trying.
Awesome. Nick, any thoughts from you on this topic?
Yeah, I think it's very important, as Hailey mentioned, to really assess your meetings and how you're running them, and rethink the practices, because what we're doing here is really developing new habits, and habits take a little while to get the hang of, whether it's habits about how you engage with folks asynchronously, how you are conducting your meetings, etc. We actually try to make sure that we structure our meetings, and we use Range to do our meetings so that we have a spinner that makes sure everybody takes part in. It's a round robin spinner so that everybody speaks at the beginning of the meeting. We have standing agenda items, but then we also have time built in so that people can add agenda items. And I think that's really crucial, because it makes sure that everybody can participate and feel that they have agency to take part in the meeting and add something that's important to them. It's not already set and they're just kind of showing up. And then we also make sure that we check out, as we mentioned before. We also really try to think of standing collaboration meetings versus our check-ins and our stand-up meetings. We do asynchronous stand-ups, which make it much more flexible and much more easy, and it also creates a data lexicon. So if everybody's submitting them asynchronously, you have all this stuff that you can search through and understand, and it's very easy to stay in sync, but it takes a little bit of a change to get that down. It actually gives you a ton of meeting time back, right? Because if you take just a half an hour stand-up every day and then give that back and really reserve times for focused in-person meetings, such as a retro or a collaboration time, it really makes you feel that you're able to show up a bit more, because it doesn't feel like, okay, this is just another stand-up meeting. You're able to focus and think through oftentimes exactly what you're sharing with people more. So we highly recommend trying them out, because I think once you can do these in Slack too. There's lots of different tools that you can do virtual stand-ups, but it really gives you a lot of time back and also creates a great data set for you to better understand all the work that you're doing.
Nick, I loved what you said there, and actually want to highlight, I saw in the comments a couple people talking about scheduling meetings intentionally with a few minutes left over. Look, just because our calendars say I've blocked 30 minutes or I've blocked an hour does not mean your meeting has to go the full distance. Recognizing that we all are in this kind of flux space, once you feel a meeting kind of come to that natural close and you've accomplished, like Hailey said, you've accomplished your purpose, close that meeting down and let people go. And what you might consider doing as well is do build in that time. Try to end your meeting 5 minutes early. And what I've started trying to do is encouraging people, hey, I'm giving you 5 minutes, go stretch, stand up from your desk, move around, say hi to your family before your next meeting. Because I don't know if you've been me, but I have been streaming through the house. Like I just got off a phone call. I've got to go run something really quickly, got to get back. So give people time and be respectful of that, and build in some of that time to be normal and be alive, right? So I love that. Any thoughts, Nick or David? Yeah, David, go ahead.
Yeah, so synchronous meetings to me are a privilege, not a right. So by default for a distributed team, async is the way to go. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't have synchronous meetings. It just means the bar for success, the bar for synchronous is higher. You have to be able to justify it. And once you decide, yes, there's a synchronous meeting, coming up with a definition of done ahead of time for that meeting can help decrease the amount of time for the meeting, just like we have definition of done for the work that we're doing. So I tend to ask people at the beginning of meetings, when it's not clear to me personally, what are we trying to achieve in this meeting and when will we know that we're done? And if you ask that up front, it can actually bring clarity to the purpose of why we're here together. So I would recommend, first of all, synchronous meetings are a privilege, not a right. And when you have one, come up with a definition of done ahead of time.
Awesome. Hailey, we'll close with you. Any thoughts on this one? Last thoughts on?
No, I think it's, I'm furiously nodding my head and like preach and everything like that too. It's great to, and so again, great things coming through the chat, but I think we kind of we are speaking, eating our own dog food. I don't know if that's like such a gross analogy, but we are, because the four of us and Erica, before we had this webinar even, we said, guys, we're not getting the work done that we needed to get done to prepare for this, right? So why don't we just set up an hour? We don't have to talk. We're just going to walk through and get things done. And having you guys almost in the same flow state together was incredibly impactful. And I think, and David, you did a really great job of asking that, reinforcing, like, when are we done here? Like, are there any outstanding questions that are keeping us worried about this webinar happening? So yeah, I think it's easy for us to sit here and say this stuff, but the fact that we are practicing it is also awesome. So not to self-congratulate our team, but it works, guys, trust me.
Absolutely. This has been such a great experience. Go ahead, David. Go ahead.
Can I say one more thing? Wait, and I always hesitate to do this because the last thing I want is to come off as, you should use Retrium. Like, that's really, truly not why I'm here today. I'm hoping that we're adding so much value in other places, but there are advantages to using tools that make your facilitated experience easier in distributed meetings. So I'm just going to talk about our product for just a second, which is that for a retrospective, if you were in person, you would start with brainstorming, right? You'd move to grouping, where you'd group topics together to say this is similar to that. You'd move on to dot voting. We want to express our preference about which topic we should talk about first, and then eventually you'd have a prioritized discussion in order based on the number of dot votes each topic has received. That flow streamlines the meeting in person. But if you're trying to do that distributed, that's really, really difficult on just a Zoom, for example. That's hard to do. So what Retrium does, and there are other options out there, you can use Trello, for example, if that's a tool that you already have. But having a product that helps you facilitate that experience can reduce the time spent in the meeting, because it's less time figuring out how do we do this, the tool supports it natively, and more time in the conversation that matters. So find other tools as well, not just for retros, that are the first class citizen of that tool is support for the meeting type you are trying to work on.
Awesome. That's so good. And you know, you're transitioning us right into our last section, which this is really, you know, if you came here saying, boy, I want to leave with 3 or 4 tools to go out and try, we're going to go into a rapid fire section now where we're going to ask, I'm going to go panelist by panelist and say, if your hands were tied and you had to get the job done and it's got to be remote, what are the tools that you got to have in your back pocket? I also threw in there, if you're a Scrum Master, an Agile coach, a manager, and you have found a tool life-saving during this season, you said, this tool has saved my life, throw that in the comments so we can share and kind of gather it there. But we're going to start with David, and I love that you kicked us off with Retrium. So you now have this reality of a team you've got to manage in our current context, all the challenges we've talked about. Give us 3 to 5 tools you got to have, and just keep it short, but the value of them.
Okay, so I'm going to skip the kind of obvious ones, you know, Zooms, the Slacks. I've got to say you should have a virtual whiteboard of some sort. MURAL is a great option. You should have a retrospective product like Retrium, great option, but I'm going to put all that aside. What are the other ones? So one that we have found very helpful is CRISP, K-R-I-S-P, which I actually have on right now. And what CRISP does is it is a live background noise filter. So I'm going to show you an example right now. I think it's on. Yeah, it's on. I'm going to clap really loud over here. But you probably can't hear anything that I'm clapping because it filters that background noise. Actually, if my kids came screaming in the back there, you still wouldn't be able to hear them. And so if you install CRISP, it plugs into Zoom and MS Teams and every other video chat product that you have, it will do wonders in helping you focus by blocking that background noise. So that's one. The second one is find a video chat product that supports natural flow between breakout rooms. So Zoom is good, it's fine, right? You can do breakout rooms, but there's others that are kind of smaller and more innovative in that space. One that I like is called Video Facilitator. I believe it's videofacilitator.com. If you want to do an open space or a world cafe or a place where people can easily move from breakout room to breakout room, those products support that as a first-class citizen. It's very helpful. So that's Video Facilitator. The last one I saw in the chat, some people were talking about virtual backgrounds as kind of an icebreaker and a fun to have. I just bought myself, based on a recommendation, something called Web Around, W-E-B WAROUND, Webaround, which is basically a green screen that attaches to the back of your chair. I wish I had it with me right now. It's still in the mail. And it allows you to project your virtual background onto the green screen, and it swivels with your chair, right? And it came as a personal recommendation. I haven't used it myself, but I'm really excited to have that so I can play with virtual backgrounds in a more fun way.
That's very cool. Thank you, David. All right. And then Nick, what are your thoughts? Top tools?
Yeah, as David mentioned, I won't go through the kind of the usual suspects, but I think I mentioned Donut for building relationships. What I would say is what's important is there's a lot of stuff that is not that hard to just try out. So just just try things for a week, put a time on that, whether it's different Slack bots for asking icebreakers or giving shout outs or thanks, try those. I think Google Docs we use, and it is something that seems like, okay, everybody's used to Google Docs, but actually using them well and being able to capture information asynchronously is really the trick. So getting practice templates down that everybody can reference, and also making sure that you have a cadence of when you're going to update those and share those. I think a lot of actually questions I was seeing are, how does async work when you're doing a stand-up and things? Part of it is, for example, with Range, we build in the ability to have to flag if you have blockers or if you have questions, and that's all integrated. But you can do that in other ways with other asynchronous things, and Google Docs is a great example. And then investing in a really good headphone and mic. I think it's critical just because you really want to make the most of these in-person sessions. It also sets you up for a future career as a podcaster. So that's an added bonus.
Perfect. If you find you have a wonderful voice and you keep people interested in webinars, you might have a future in radio. I love that, Nick. Thank you. Great stuff. All right, Hailey, your thoughts, top tools.
Yeah, sure. So working for MURAL, I'm a very visual person. So I think in colors and pictures. So Loom has been really popular for me and for our team for creating short and sweet videos. So you screen share a mural with your visual, and then you're talking and describing a story. So it's light and short and sweet storytelling, and you can share that in different channels really quickly. Mine are also a little bit, I guess Giphy is one of my favorite ones in terms of a plugin and something to use because it just gets things across more powerfully than I can ever express with my own words. And for just personal care while you're going through all these calls and stuff, a great desk for you to transition from sitting to standing, even if it's a table that you're behind me, my fiance is using our library books. So you know what, MacGyver, what you gotta do, but make sure you're ergonomic. And then a water bottle, actually good water, yeah, cinder blocks, boom, good. And then a water bottle always by my desk just to keep myself hydrated and healthy. So those are mine.
Great tools. I love that you talked about self-care. That could be a whole webinar in itself, yes. Maybe one for the future. All right, guys, as we're kind of starting to bring this in for a landing, I'm going to ask for a 1-minute summary, just kind of the essence of what you took from here and final recommendations for this audience. David, we'll start with you.
So virtual distributed work is hard. It takes more intention than co-located work, but go in with the assumption that everything you can do co-located, you can do distributed if you just give it a bit of thought, and it will take you really far.
Amazing. Excellent. Thank you so much. Nick, your thoughts?
Really making sure the team is part of the process. So we're all in this together, and being able to try things out and get a feedback loop going where you're saying, how is this working for folks? Will help them check in with themselves, but also know that their team has their back and is trying to get this right, because there's a lot of stuff coming at us, and that's the only way really we're going to sort out the right approach to making the adjustments.
Fantastic. And then Hailey, your thoughts?
Yep. Be intentional, I think has been a big theme. Give other people permission, now, and yourself included, to try things and experiment with different ways of working. And think of the practices you're doing here or what you'd like to do as an evolution of things that you have already done in person and that have worked well. Not a shift, but an evolution. And that will make that barrier of jumping from in-person to online feel a little bit more like you have a bridge to step over that chasm.
Wow. That's so amazing. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I want to say thank you, first of all, to all of you who joined us today. Thank you for joining us for Tools for Effective Agile Teams. I want to remind you, we have recorded this webinar. It's going to be available along with your Q&A and some of the links from the chat even on the Retrium blog. You can follow them at Retrium HQ on Twitter. That's where they're going to first announce it's there, or just hit Google for the Retrium blog and you'll find it there. I want to thank you, everyone who submitted questions before this. We couldn't have done this without you. And thank you also to all of our panelists, for David and Hailey and Nick. Thank you guys so much for being here and sharing your expertise with us. And definitely I want to thank Retrium for presenting this and co-presenting with the Agile Alliance. Thank you so much for making great content available to the community. And so lastly, I'm Isaac Garcia. Again, I'm from Coaching Agile Journeys, the virtual online community, but it has absolutely been a pleasure to spend this time today with you online and with all of you panelists. So I want to encourage everyone, please stay safe wherever you are in the world, be an encouragement to others out there, and keep on learning and growing. Like Hailey said, it's a step-by-step, build a bridge to where you want to go. I assure you the journey is indeed exciting. Well, we're going to take a playbook from what we talked about today and actually end with about 3.5 minutes left. Encourage you to stretch, move around, and listen, look forward to the feedback and Q&A and recording that comes from this. So also, I'm sure future webinars, hopefully we'll see you there. Stay safe, everyone, wherever you are in the world. Thanks again. Bye, guys.